Most people don't fail because they are weak. They fail because they panic. They lose control when pressure arrives. Their emotions spike. Their thoughts scatter. Their body tightens. And in that moment, they hand their power away. This audiobook exists to end that pattern. Because pressure is not the problem. Emotion is not the problem. The problem is that you were never trained. You were never trained to stay cold when your heart rate rises. You were never trained to think clearly when stakes are high. You were never trained to act decisively when everything feels urgent. So when life applies pressure, your nervous system takes over. And an untrained nervous system always chooses fear, impulse, and reaction. This audiobook will retrain that system. Not with motivation. Not with hype. But with discipline. Cold discipline. By the end of this audiobook, pressure will no longer feel like a threat. It will feel like a signal. A signal that it's time to slow down internally while everything else speeds up. You will learn how to remain calm when others rush. Remain silent when others explain. Remain steady when others emotionally leak. Because the person who stays cold under pressure controls the situation. Always. This is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unreachable. Unreachable by provocation. Unreachable by stress. Unreachable by chaos. Pressure exposes the truth. And the truth is this. The calmest person in the room is the most dangerous one. Over the next 2 hours, you will hear the same ideas repeated. On purpose. Because repetition is how the nervous system learns. You don't rise to the level of information. You fall to the level of training. This audiobook is training. If you stay with it, if you listen without distraction, your mind will begin to slow down. Your reactions will weaken. Your clarity will sharpen. And when pressure arrives, as it always does, you will not rush. You will not react. You will not break. You will stay cold. Chapter 1: Pressure reveals the untrained mind. Pressure doesn't change who you are. It shows you who you are. When everything is calm, anyone can look confident. When nothing is at stake, anyone can sound disciplined. But the moment pressure enters the room, the truth surfaces. That's when your training, or lack of it, speaks for you. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Most people don't understand this. They think pressure creates the problem. They think stress makes them emotional. They think urgency forces bad decisions. That's a lie. Pressure doesn't create weakness. It exposes it. And what pressure exposes, it exposes fast. You have a choice. You always have a choice. But you only see that choice if your mind has been trained to slow down under stress. That's the key. Pressure arrives without warning. A difficult conversation. A confrontation. A deadline. A financial decision. A moment where something important could be gained. Or lost. And in that moment, most people do the same thing. They react. They speak too quickly. They explain too much. They defend themselves emotionally. They rush to relieve the discomfort instead of mastering it. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Look at business deals that fall apart. Not because the numbers were wrong. Not because the opportunity wasn't real. But because someone couldn't control their tone. couldn't control their ego, couldn't control their urgency. They sent the email too fast. They pushed for reassurance. They tried to force certainty where patience was required. That wasn't bad luck. That was an untrained mind exposed. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need anyone's approval to pause. But when pressure hits, untrained people forget that. They think speed equals strength. They think emotion equals authenticity. They think reacting proves they care. It doesn't. It proves they're unmanaged. Pressure shows up in relationships the same way. Arguments don't end relationships. Reactions do. One sharp comment. One emotional overreach. One moment where someone chose to win the feeling instead of win the situation. They raised their voice. They said the thing they felt. They unloaded emotion instead of exercising control. And once it's out, it can't be taken back. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. You have a choice in those moments. You can react for relief. Or you can pause for control. That's the difference between power and regret. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your first impulse under pressure is almost always wrong. It's emotional. It's defensive. It's short-term. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. But discipline begins when you stop obeying your first impulse. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about delaying action until emotion loses control. That's the key. When pressure rises, your nervous system wants resolution. Fast. Any resolution. It doesn't care if the resolution costs you respect, leverage, or long-term outcomes. It just wants the discomfort to stop. So it pushes you to speak. To explain. To react. You don't need their permission to resist that impulse. You need training. Think about authority. Real authority. The person with real authority doesn't rush. They don't fidget verbally. They don't fill silence with noise. They let pressure sit. Why? Because they've trained themselves to tolerate it. Pressure is uncomfortable. But discomfort is not danger. Untrained minds confuse the two. They treat discomfort like an emergency. So they act urgently. And urgency under pressure always weakens your position. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Here's a practical rule you need to adopt immediately. When pressure hits, do less. Not more. Fewer words. Slower movements. Longer pauses. That's not passivity. That's control. The moment you feel the urge to react, that's your signal. Not to act, but to stop. You have a choice. You can let pressure pull behavior out of you. Or you can hold your position and decide deliberately. That's the difference between being driven and being directed. Most people don't lose because they lacked intelligence. They lose because they leaked emotion at the wrong moment. They wanted to be understood. They wanted to be validated. They wanted the pressure to go away. So they traded leverage for relief. That's always a bad deal. It's not about being right. It's about being effective. That's the key. Here's your first behavioral instruction. The next time pressure appears, today, not someday. Do not respond immediately. Count 3 slow breaths. Physically slow your body. Lower your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Your body leads your mind. Then ask one question internally. What is the controlled response here? Not the emotional one. Not the clever one. The controlled one. That pause alone will separate you from 90% of people. Pressure will keep showing up. It doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care about your excuses. But now you understand the game. Pressure is not the enemy. Reaction is. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Master this, and you don't just survive pressure. You use it. Because when others rush, you slow down. When others react, you observe. When others lose themselves, you keep control. And control is everything. You've seen what pressure exposes. Now it's time to understand what truly gives you power when pressure is highest. You've learned how reactions betray you. Now, let's talk about why emotional reactions are not just mistakes, but surrender. Before we continue, pause for a moment. If this message is hitting you, it's not by accident. It means you're someone who understands that control is learned, not given. This channel exists for one reason. To train your mind when most people stay untrained. Not motivation. Not noise. Not empty hype. Real discipline. Real psychological control. Real behavioral change. If you want more long-form audiobooks like this, audiobooks that sharpen your focus, harden your mindset, and train emotional discipline, then take one deliberate action right now. Subscribe. Not out of habit. Out of intention. Because this channel is built for people who move differently. People who don't react. People who train in silence while others stay emotional. And if you're listening on YouTube, understand this. The algorithm rewards consistency, but discipline rewards commitment. Liking this video, subscribing, and staying engaged helps keep this content alive. It allows longer audiobooks, deeper training, stronger material. You don't need permission to improve your mind. You just need to decide. Now take a breath. Recenter. And get ready. Because what comes next is where most people lose their power without even realizing it. You learned that pressure exposes the untrained mind. Now we go deeper. Chapter 2. Emotional reactions are a form of surrender. Every time you react emotionally, you give something away. You give away leverage. You give away authority. You give away control. Most people don't realize this. They think reacting is strength. They think expressing emotion is honesty. They think letting people know how they feel is power. It's not. It's surrender. And the moment you understand this, your entire behavior under pressure begins to change. You have a choice. You always have a choice. That's the key. An emotional reaction feels justified in the moment. It feels necessary. It feels earned. Someone disrespects you. Someone challenges you. Someone pressures you. Your body heats up. Your thoughts race. Your mouth wants to move. And right there, right in that moment, you are standing at a crossroads. One path is reaction. The other is control. Reaction feels good immediately. Control pays off later. Most people choose relief. Disciplined people choose power. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Understand this clearly. When you react emotionally, you are letting someone else dictate your internal state. They speak. You spike. They provoke. You respond. They apply pressure. You fold internally, even if you try to hide it externally. That's surrender. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their approval to stay silent. But when you react, you hand them that authority anyway. That's the cost of emotional leakage. Look at arguments. Not the loud ones. The quiet ones that change relationships. The person who loses is rarely the one with fewer facts. It's the one who loses composure first. They raise their voice. They over-explain. They defend themselves emotionally. And in doing so, they signal weakness. Not because they're wrong, but because they're reactive. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Here's a hard truth you need to hear. People don't respect emotional reactions. They exploit them. If someone knows they can provoke you, they control you. If someone knows you'll react, they own the tempo. Calm people control pace. Reactive people chase it. That's the difference. Think about negotiations. The person who speaks last often wins. The person who rushes to fill silence often loses. Why? Because silence forces the other side to reveal themselves. Emotion reveals you. When you react emotionally, you reveal what matters to you. You reveal your insecurity. You reveal your attachment. An attachment under pressure weakens your position. It's not about being cold for the sake of ego. It's about being disciplined for the sake of outcome. That's the key. Most people confuse emotional expression with authenticity. They say, "This is just how I feel." They say, "I'm being real." They say, "I won't hold it in." But discipline was never about denying reality. It was about choosing timing. Not every feeling deserves action. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every impulse deserves obedience. You have a choice. Emotion can inform you. It should not command you. Here's where surrender becomes obvious. When you react, you're no longer acting intentionally. You're acting reflexively. Reflexes are trained, or untrained. An untrained nervous system reacts fast and inaccurately. A trained nervous system pauses and selects. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Look at leadership. The least stable leader in the room is never the loudest. It's the most reactive. The one who snaps. The one who sends emotional messages. The one who lets stress leak into their tone. People don't feel safe around that. They don't trust it. They don't follow it. Calm communicates competence. Silence communicates confidence. That's not personality. That's discipline. Here's a rule you must adopt. If something triggers you, it owns you. Until you master it. Triggers are not injustices. They're indicators. They show you where your control ends. That's the key. Instead of justifying your reaction, study it. Instead of defending it, dissect it. Ask yourself, why did that get a response from me? What was I protecting? What was I afraid of losing? That awareness is how surrender turns into strength. Practical instruction, listen carefully. The next time you feel emotionally charged, do not speak immediately. Do not text. Do not explain. Do not defend. Delay. Delay is discipline in action. Give yourself time for emotion to peak and fall. Emotion always weakens with time, if you don't feed it. Most people feed it with words, with actions, with reactions. Starve it instead. That's how you regain control. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need validation for restraint. You don't need applause for discipline. Quiet control is invisible, but its effects are permanent. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. When you stop reacting emotionally, something shifts. People speak differently to you. They hesitate more. They test less. Not because you're intimidating, but because you're unpredictable. They can't read you. They can't push you. They can't rush you. And that uncertainty gives you leverage. This chapter is not asking you to suppress emotion forever. It's asking you to stop surrendering to it. There's a difference. Emotion is human. Reaction is optional. You have a choice. Every time pressure shows up, you can either give control away, or keep it. That's the key. You now understand this truth. Emotional reactions are not honesty. They are surrender. And disciplined people do not surrender under pressure. You've learned what reaction costs you. Now it's time to learn how to take back control at the physical level. Because the body is where discipline begins. You stopped handing your power away emotionally. Now, let's talk about how to slow your body to command your mind. Stay with the process. This part matters. Chapter 3, Slow your body to command your mind. You don't lose control in your mind first. You lose it in your body. Your breathing speeds up. Your shoulders rise. Your jaw tightens. Your muscles brace. And once the body is activated, the mind follows. That's why most people try to think calm and fail. They start in the wrong place. Control does not begin in thought. It begins in physiology. That's the key. Pressure doesn't just challenge your thoughts. It hijacks your nervous system. Heart rate up. Breath shallow. Vision narrows. Attention collapses. This is not weakness. This is biology. But biology can be trained. You have a choice. You always have a choice. But only if your body is slow enough to give your mind access to it. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Here's the mistake most people make. They wait until pressure hits to try to calm down. That's too late. By then, the body is already in control. And an activated body does not listen to logic. That's why discipline must be physical before it becomes mental. You don't think your way into calm. You behave your way into it. That's the key. Watch someone under pressure. They talk faster. They move faster. They interrupt. They over-explain. Speed is the signal of loss of control. Calm people move slowly on purpose. They lower the tempo of the room. That's authority. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need approval to pause mid-conversation. But you must be willing to feel uncomfortable doing it. Discomfort is the training ground. Let's make this practical. The moment you feel pressure, do one thing first. Slow your breathing. Not deep. Slow. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Longer exhale tells the nervous system there is no immediate threat. That single action can stop a reaction before it happens. That's not theory. That's physiology. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Next, check your posture. Are your shoulders tense? Drop them. Are you leaning forward? Lean back slightly. These signals matter. Your body posture feeds information to your brain. A rigid body tells the mind danger is present. A relaxed body tells the mind you are in control. You have a choice. Use your body as a brake, or let it be an accelerator. That's the key. Now understand this. Slowing your body will feel wrong at first. Your instincts will tell you to hurry. To respond. To prove something. That's conditioning, not truth. Most people are addicted to speed because speed hides fear. Slowness exposes it. But slowness is where power lives. Think about high-pressure professionals. Surgeons don't rush when the situation is critical. Pilots don't move faster when something goes wrong. Elite operators don't panic. They slow down. Because they've trained their bodies to respond calmly to stress. That training did not happen in the moment. It happened long before. That's the standard. Here's another instruction, non-negotiable. When pressure rises, reduce your movements by half. Half the gestures. Half the words. Half the speed. This forces your nervous system to downshift. Your mind will follow. It's not about appearing calm. It's about being calm. That's the key. Most people wait for calm before they slow down. Disciplined people slow down to create calm. That's the difference. You don't need motivation for this. You need repetition. Practice slowing your body in small moments. Waiting in line. Listening without interrupting. Pausing before replying. These moments train your nervous system. Pressure is just the exam. Here's what will happen if you do this consistently. Your thoughts will become clearer. Your reactions will weaken. Your presence will feel heavier. People will notice, even if they don't say it. Because calm is contagious. And control is felt before it's understood. You have a choice. You can let pressure speed you up, or you can use it as a signal to slow down. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Master your body, and your mind will follow. You've learned that emotional reactions are surrender. Now you understand where real control begins. But physical control alone isn't enough. Next, you must learn when to stop talking entirely. Because words under pressure often do more damage than silence. You slowed your body. Now let's talk about restraint in communication. Here's what most people miss. You don't rise to calm when pressure hits. You default to whatever your body has practiced most. If your body is used to tension, you will tense. If your body is used to rushing, you will rush. If your body is used to reacting, you will react. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. That's the key. This means emotional control is not a mindset problem. It's a conditioning problem. Your nervous system learns through repetition, not intention. You can want to stay calm all you want. But if your body has been trained by years of stress, urgency, and emotional expression, it will override your thinking the moment pressure appears. You have a choice. But only if your body gives you the space to choose. This is why disciplined people look different under stress. They don't just think differently. They move differently. They sit back instead of leaning forward. They pause instead of interrupting. They let silence breathe instead of filling it. That's not confidence. That's conditioning. They train their body to tolerate stillness when it wants motion. That's the key. Here's a hard truth. Stillness under pressure will feel uncomfortable at first. Your body will scream for action. Your mind will search for words. Your instincts will push urgency. That discomfort is not danger. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from chaos. Withdrawal from emotional habits. Withdrawal from reactivity. Most people never stay in that discomfort long enough to retrain themselves. They move. They speak. They react. And the cycle stays intact. So here's another rule you must adopt. When pressure rises, your job is not to solve the problem immediately. Your job is to stabilize your body first. No exceptions. Because a dysregulated body cannot produce disciplined decisions. That's not philosophy. That's reality. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Let's talk about the voice. Your voice exposes your internal state faster than your words. Under pressure, most people speak louder, speak faster, change tone. That signals loss of control before content even matters. So when pressure hits, lower your voice slightly. Slow your speech deliberately. Even if it feels unnatural. Especially if it feels unnatural. That act alone sends a message, to others and to yourself. I am not rushed. That's the key. Now understand this. You are always teaching your nervous system what normal looks like. If your days are frantic, your baseline becomes frantic. If your movements are rushed, your baseline becomes rushed. If your breathing is shallow, your baseline becomes shallow. Then pressure hits, and you have nowhere to go but chaos. So discipline must exist before pressure. That's why this audiobook keeps repeating the same message. You don't perform calm. You practice calm. Here's a daily behavioral standard to install. Move 10 to 15% slower than necessary. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Deliberately. Walk slower. Reach slower. Sit down slower. This is not about appearance. It's about training your nervous system that speed is optional. That's the key. Most people associate slowness with weakness. That's conditioning. Not truth. In reality, speed without control is panic. Slowness with awareness is dominance. Look at anyone who commands a room. They don't rush to be noticed. They allow attention to come to them. Because their body language communicates stability. Stability is authority. You have a choice. You can let pressure hijack your physiology. Or you can use your body as an anchor. Pressure is the test. Reaction is the failure. Master this layer, and emotional discipline becomes sustainable, not forced. You now understand something most people never learn. Control is physical before it is mental. You slowed your body. Your mind followed. But even a calm body can sabotage itself with words. Because under pressure, people talk themselves out of power. You've mastered physical restraint. Now it's time to master verbal restraint. Chapter 4. Stop explaining yourself under pressure. There's a moment most people remember. Your chest tightens. Someone is watching, waiting, judging. And before you even think, you start talking. You explain. You justify. You defend something that didn't need defending. Later, you replay it in your head and think, why did I say all that? That moment wasn't about communication. It was about pressure. And pressure makes people betray themselves. This chapter is about the habit that quietly destroys authority, leverage, and respect, not through weakness, but through too many words at the wrong time. If you've ever talked yourself into a worse position, this chapter is for you. If you've ever felt smaller after explaining, this chapter is for you. And if you're ready to learn how powerful people stay powerful without saying much at all, read slowly. Because what you don't say under pressure matters more than anything you do. Most people don't speak to communicate. They speak to relieve pressure. The moment tension appears, they rush to explain, to justify, to defend, to clarify. Not because it's necessary, but because silence feels dangerous. That's the mistake. Under pressure, words are rarely neutral. They reveal insecurity before they reveal truth. That's the key. When pressure rises, your nervous system wants relief. And talking feels like relief. Explaining feels like control. But most explanations are not strength. They're leakage. You give away information. You expose emotion. You weaken position. And once words leave your mouth, you can't take them back. Silence, on the other hand, costs nothing. Watch people under pressure. They over-explain simple decisions. They repeat themselves. They add unnecessary details. They apologize when no apology is required. This isn't politeness. It's self-protection. They're trying to manage how they're perceived instead of managing themselves. That's surrender. Here's the truth most people avoid. You don't need to be understood in the moment. You need to be controlled. Understanding can come later. Control must come first. That's the key. When you explain yourself under pressure, 3 things happen. First, you speed up. Second, you lose precision. Third, you talk past your own authority. The more pressure you feel, the more likely you are to say something unnecessary. And unnecessary words always weaken leverage. Silence does something most people don't realize. It creates gravity. When you don't rush to explain, others lean in. They listen more closely. They fill the gaps themselves. And whatever they imagine is usually stronger than whatever you would have said. That's power. Most people are afraid silence will make them look guilty, weak, or incompetent. That fear comes from conditioning. You were taught that quick answers equal confidence. That's false. Calm restraint is confidence. Think about authority figures. They don't rush explanations. They don't defend every choice. They don't react emotionally to pressure. They pause. Because a pause signals certainty. That's the key. Here's the rule, non-negotiable. Under pressure, reduce your words by at least half. Half the explanations. Half the justifications. Half the emotional language. Say less than feels comfortable. Discomfort is the indicator you're doing it right. Let's be practical. When challenged, criticized, or questioned under pressure, You don't respond immediately. You pause. Even 1 second changes the dynamic. That pause tells your nervous system you're not under attack. And it tells the other person you're not reactive. Then, when you speak, you do one of 3 things only. You state a fact. You ask a question. Or you say nothing. No storytelling. No defending your character. No emotional explanations. Facts don't bleed energy. Stories do. Example. Instead of saying, "Let me explain what happened because it wasn't really my fault and I was under a lot of stress," you say, "This is what happened." And you stop. Silence does the rest. Most people talk because they're afraid of how silence will be interpreted. But silence isn't empty. Silence communicates composure. Silence communicates boundaries. Silence communicates that you don't need approval. That's authority. Understand this. Every extra word you speak under pressure increases the chance of error. You say something unclear. Something emotional. Something unnecessary. And now you're explaining the explanation. That's the spiral. Disciplined people don't try to control conversations. They control themselves. And self-control changes conversations automatically. That's the key. Another mistake people make. They explain to be liked. But authority isn't built on likability. It's built on consistency and restraint. You don't owe everyone comfort. You owe yourself control. Here's a powerful practice. When you feel the urge to explain, don't. Instead, slow your body like you learned in the previous chapter. Breathe slower. Lower your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Then decide if words are actually required. Most of the time, they aren't. Silence filters weak pressure. People who push for explanations are often testing boundaries. When you don't rush to satisfy them, they either clarify their question or back off. Either way, you win. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak deliberately. With intention. With structure. Without emotional overflow. Words become tools, not leaks. Here's another rule. Never explain while emotionally activated. If your heart rate is up. If your breath is shallow. If your body is tense. You wait. Anything said in that state will need correction later. Silence prevents damage. That's the key. Notice something important. Calm people aren't quiet because they're unsure. They're quiet because they're certain. They don't need to fill space. They let space work for them. Over time, this changes how people treat you. They stop pushing. They stop fishing for reactions. They stop assuming access to your emotions. Because you no longer hand them control through words. This practice will feel uncomfortable at first. You'll feel rude. Cold. Detached. That's conditioning talking. In reality, you're building boundaries. And boundaries create respect. Train this in small moments. Don't explain why you're busy. Don't justify your preferences. Don't defend neutral decisions. Short answers. Clear pauses. Calm delivery. This trains restraint. Pressure is just the exam. Everyday moments are the training. Here's what will happen if you master this. Your presence will feel heavier. Your words will carry more weight. Your silence will command attention. People will stop interrupting you. Not because you demand it, but because restraint demands it automatically. You slowed your body. Now you've restrained your words. That's control. But there's one level deeper. Because even silence can become reactive if the mind is cluttered. Next, you must learn how to eliminate internal noise. So your silence isn't tension, but clarity. Chapter 5. Clear the mind by removing internal noise. Everything you're learning here only works if your mind is clear. That's why high performers don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. If you want faster control under pressure, sharper thinking, and fewer emotional reactions, you need a structure that trains your nervous system daily, not occasionally. Silence is useless if your mind is loud. You can stop talking. But if your thoughts are racing, defending, rehearsing, reacting, you're still not in control. Most people think pressure comes from the outside. It doesn't. Pressure comes from internal noise. The constant commentary. The mental arguing. The replaying. The predicting. The imagined conversations that never happen. That noise is what makes silence uncomfortable. That noise is what forces people to speak when they shouldn't. Because when the mind is cluttered, silence feels unsafe. This chapter is about removing that noise. Not suppressing it. Not fighting it. Removing it. Because a quiet mouth without a quiet mind is not strength. It's restraint under strain. And strain eventually breaks. Here's the truth. Most people don't react to reality. They react to their interpretation of reality. And those interpretations are running non-stop in the background. You're not stressed because of what's happening. You're stressed because of what your mind keeps saying about what's happening. That's the key. Internal noise is not random. It has patterns. And once you see the patterns, you can shut them down. Let's identify them. The 3 sources of internal noise. Internal noise comes from 3 places only. First, unfinished thoughts. Second, imagined threats. Third, identity defense. That's it. Every mental spiral fits into one of these. Let's break them down. 1. Unfinished thoughts. Your brain hates open loops. Anything unresolved. A conversation. A decision. A mistake. A future obligation. Your mind keeps it running in the background. Like a browser tab you never closed. Most people carry dozens of these at once. That's why their mind never rests. They try to relax. But the system is overloaded. Here's the mistake. They try to calm the mind inside the chaos. You can't. Clarity comes from closure. If something is unresolved, your mind will keep returning to it, no matter how calm you try to be. So the rule is simple. What you don't close, controls you. You don't need to solve everything. You need to decide what happens next. Decision closes loops. Not outcomes, decisions. I'll think about this tomorrow at 10 a.m. I've decided not to engage. I've made my choice. That's enough. Once the brain knows there's a plan, it releases the loop. That alone removes massive noise. 2. Imagine threats. This is the loudest one. Most mental noise is fear dressed as preparation. What if they think? What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? What if this goes badly? None of that is happening. It's simulated danger. Your nervous system can't tell the difference. So it reacts as if the threat is real. Heart rate up. Breathing shallow. Mind racing. And now you're under pressure, without anything actually happening. This is why people feel stressed in silence. Their body is reacting to a movie in their head. Here's the rule. If it's not happening right now, it doesn't get your energy. Not later. Not hypothetically. Not emotionally. Right now. This isn't denial. It's discipline. Calm people are not calmer because life is easier. They are calmer because they refuse to mentally live in the future. They stay where their feet are. That's power. 3. Identity defense. This is the most dangerous source of noise. Your mind is constantly asking, how does this affect how I'm seen? Respect. Competence. Worth. Status. So when something challenges that identity, criticism, silence, uncertainty, your mind starts defending, explaining, justifying, proving, rehearsing arguments, not to solve the situation, but to protect the image. This is where most people lose control. Because identity defense feels personal. And personal reactions are always loud. Here's the truth most people avoid. You don't need to protect your identity in real time. Strong identities don't react. They endure. Every time you rush to defend who you are, you signal uncertainty about it. Certainty doesn't argue. Certainty waits. That's the key. Why internal noise makes silence impossible. People think they hate silence. They don't. They hate being alone with their thoughts. Because their thoughts are undisciplined. So silence feels like exposure. That's why they talk. That's why they check their phone. That's why they explain. That's why they fill space. Noise is distraction from noise. The solution isn't more stimulation. It's mental order. The rule of mental authority. Here's the rule disciplined people live by. If your mind is clear, your body is calm. If your body is calm, your words are controlled. Everything starts in the mind. You don't control speech first. You don't control emotion first. You control attention. Where your attention goes, energy follows. Where energy follows, behavior changes. So we train attention. The noise clearing protocol. This is simple. Not easy, but simple. Use it daily. Step 1, name the noise. Noise loses power when it's identified. Instead of thinking, I'm stressed, you say, I'm replaying a conversation. I'm predicting an outcome. I'm defending my image. Label it. The brain shifts from emotion to observation. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. Step 2, return to the body. Internal noise lives in thought. Authority lives in the body. Slow your breathing. Relax your jaw. Drop your shoulders. Not to relax, but to anchor. Your body is always in the present. The mind follows when you lead it there. This is why physical stillness increases mental clarity. Step 3, reduce the question. Most noise comes from big, vague questions. What should I do? What does this mean? What if everything goes wrong? Those questions are too large. They overwhelm the system. So you reduce them. What is required right now? What is the next controlled action? What can wait? Small questions calm the mind. Big questions create noise. Step 4. Decide or dismiss. Every thought gets one of two outcomes. A decision. Or dismissal. If action is required, decide. If not, dismiss. No debating. No revisiting. No emotional negotiation. Mental discipline is deciding what deserves access. What a clear mind feels like. A clear mind is not empty. It's quiet and directed. Thoughts appear, but don't stick. Pressure shows up, but doesn't escalate. Silence feels neutral, not threatening. You don't feel numb. You feel available. Available to listen. Available to respond. Available to act. This is why powerful people seem unbothered. Not because they don't care, but because their mind isn't crowded with unnecessary noise. Silence revisited. Now we return to silence. Earlier, you learned silence creates gravity. Now you understand why. Silence backed by a noisy mind feels tense. Silence backed by clarity feels solid. People sense the difference. That's why calm silence commands respect. Not because it's quiet, but because it's clean. A final truth. You don't need to control every thought. You need to stop giving them all equal importance. Noise is just unfiltered thinking. Clarity is selective attention. And attention is authority. When your mind is clear, you don't rush. You don't explain. You don't react. You choose. That's control. And control is what everything in this book is building toward. In the next chapter, we'll go even deeper into how to maintain this control when others try to disrupt it. Because clarity is powerful. But clarity under pressure, that's dominance. Chapter 6. Decide once. Execute without debate. Mental control isn't built by insight alone. It's built by repetition. That's why the people who stay composed under pressure don't rely on memory or motivation. They rely on daily practices that train clarity, restraint, and emotional regulation automatically. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong path. They fail because they keep reopening decisions. They decide, then doubt, then reconsider, then hesitate. And in that hesitation, momentum dies. That's the key. A decision is not just a choice. It's a closure. When you decide and keep debating afterward, you didn't decide. You delayed. The mind loves options. Options feel safe. Options feel intelligent. But options keep you stuck. Progress requires commitment. And commitment requires finality. Here's the hard truth. Clarity does not come before action. Clarity comes from action. Waiting to feel certain is a trap. Certainty is built by moving forward and adjusting, not by thinking longer. Most internal noise returns after a decision. Was this right? What if there was a better option? Should I change course? This noise is not wisdom. It's fear disguised as analysis. Disciplined people handle decisions differently. They separate decision time from execution time. When it's time to decide, they think carefully. When it's time to act, they stop thinking. That's the key. Once execution begins, debate ends. No internal negotiation. No second guessing. No emotional commentary. Only action. Why is this so difficult? Because the ego wants control. Revisiting decisions gives the illusion of control. But real control comes from follow-through. Understand this. Every time you reopen a decision, you teach your mind that commitment is optional. And a mind that believes commitment is optional will never build momentum. Let's make this practical. When faced with a decision, ask 3 questions. Does this align with my long-term direction? Is this reversible? Do I have enough information to move forward? Not perfect information, just enough. If the answers are yes, yes, and yes, you decide. And once decided, you lock it. You don't revisit it emotionally. You don't replay alternatives. You don't ask for reassurance. You execute. Execution is not glamorous. It's repetitive. It's quiet. It's often boring. That's why most people abandon it. They confuse emotional excitement with correctness. Here's the distinction. Motivation feels good. Discipline feels stable. You don't need to feel inspired to execute. You need to feel committed. That's the key. A powerful rule. Never redecide during discomfort. Discomfort distorts perception. Fatigue makes problems look larger. Stress makes alternatives look better. Emotion exaggerates doubt. You don't change direction while under strain. You rest. Then continue. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They start strong. Then resistance appears. Then they reinterpret resistance as a signal to stop. Resistance is not a stop sign. It's a confirmation that execution has begun. Elite performers expect resistance. They don't personalize it. They don't dramatize it. They simply continue. Another rule, non-negotiable. Separate evaluation from execution. Evaluation happens after a set period of action. Not during. During execution, your only job is to show up and do the work. Think of it this way. A plane does not change direction mid-takeoff because of turbulence. It commits to the runway. Once airborne, adjustments are possible. Before that, commitment is everything. Mental debate drains energy. Execution generates energy. That's why people feel better after acting, not before. Action clears the mind. Here's what will change when you adopt this. Your focus will sharpen. Your confidence will stabilize. Your results will compound. Not because you chose perfectly, but because you stopped abandoning yourself mid-process. This discipline extends beyond big decisions. It applies to small ones too. You decide when to wake up, and you wake up. You decide when to work, and you work. You decide when to stop, and you stop. No negotiations. Each followed decision builds trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of authority. You don't need external validation when you trust your own follow-through. This will feel rigid at first. Your mind will resist. It will argue for flexibility, freedom, comfort. But discipline is not rigidity. It's reliability. Freedom is not the ability to change your mind every moment. Freedom is the ability to commit and see things through. That's the paradox. Pressure will test this. You'll want to escape discomfort by reconsidering. Don't. Pressure is the exam. Execution is the answer. You've learned to slow your body. You've learned to restrain your words. You've learned to quiet your mind. Now you've learned to commit and move without debate. This is how momentum is built. But momentum alone is not mastery. Because without recovery, discipline collapses. Next, you must learn when to stop pushing, and how to rest without losing control. There's another reason most people keep reopening decisions. They're afraid of ownership. When you commit fully, you remove excuses. There's no one else to blame. No alternative to hide behind. And that level of responsibility feels heavy. So the mind keeps options alive. Not for flexibility, but for escape. That's the truth. Undecided people always have explanations. Committed people have results. That's the difference. When you decide once and execute without debate, you accept that mistakes may happen. And that's fine. Because correction is faster than hesitation. Here's something most people never learn. A wrong decision executed with discipline often beats a right decision executed inconsistently. Why? Because execution creates feedback. Feedback creates adjustment. Adjustment creates progress. Indecision creates nothing. This is why disciplined people don't chase perfection. They chase alignment and momentum. They move. They observe. They correct. But they don't freeze. Another rule to adopt. When you feel the urge to ask others for reassurance after deciding, don't. That urge is doubt seeking permission. You already decided. External validation weakens internal authority. Trust yourself enough to see it through. This doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you respect timing. Input belongs before the decision. Action belongs after it. Mixing the two creates chaos. Over time, something powerful happens. Your mind stops arguing so much. Because it learns a new pattern. Decisions lead to action. Action leads to resolution. No endless loops. No internal bargaining. Just movement. This creates mental quiet. Not because life gets easier, but because your mind stops sabotaging momentum. You become harder to shake. People around you will notice this shift. You'll feel more grounded. More decisive. Less reactive. Not louder. Not aggressive. Just solid. This is what self-mastery looks like in motion. Not endless planning. Not constant rethinking. But clear decisions, followed by calm execution. Again and again. Decide once. Execute without debate. Adjust only after action. That's the system. That's the discipline. And that's how momentum becomes identity. Chapter 7. Recover control after a slip, instantly. There's a moment no one prepares you for. Not the moment you're under pressure. But the moment after you crack. You hear your own voice get sharper than you wanted. You feel emotion leak into a sentence. You realize, too late, you gave more than you meant to. And instantly, your mind panics. I messed that up. I lost control. Now they've seen it. That moment is where most people collapse. Not because of the reaction, but because they don't know what to do next. This chapter is about that moment. Because control isn't measured by how you act at your best. It's measured by how fast you return to center after your worst. That's the difference between composure and fragility. You will lose control sometimes. You will say too much. You will react emotionally. You will feel the pressure win, briefly. That's not failure. That's human. The difference between weak people and disciplined people is not that one group never slips. It's how long they stay there. Most people don't lose control permanently. They lose it once. And then keep losing it by panicking about the loss. They spiral. This chapter is about ending the spiral. Because control is not about never reacting. It's about recovering before damage spreads. That's the key. The biggest lie about control. Here's the lie people believe. If I reacted, I've already failed. So they overcorrect. They explain. They apologize excessively. They try to undo the moment with more words. And now one small slip becomes a full collapse. Here's the truth. A single reaction does not remove authority. Overreaction to the reaction does. Authority isn't fragile. It's resilient. But only if you stop digging. Why people spiral after a slip. After a reaction, 3 things happen internally. Self-judgment. Urgency to repair perception. Fear of lasting damage. So they rush. They talk more. They justify. They clarify emotions. They chase reassurance. This is where control is actually lost. Not in the initial moment, but in the recovery. Disciplined people recover quietly. Undisciplined people recover loudly. The first rule of recovery: do nothing first. When you notice you've reacted, your instinct will be to fix it. Resist that. Your first move is stillness. No explaining. No correcting. No emotional cleanup. Why? Because most damage is imagined. Your nervous system is louder than the situation. Pause. Let the moment settle. Time reduces intensity automatically. Trying to repair immediately often escalates it. The second rule: don't narrate your mistake. Never say, "I shouldn't have reacted like that. I'm just stressed. Sorry, that came out wrong." That's narration. Narration keeps the mistake alive. You bring attention back to it. You underline it. You invite evaluation. Strong people don't spotlight their slips. They move forward as if control was never lost. Because confidence is contagious. And so is doubt. The third rule: reset the body before the mind. You cannot think your way back into control. You must physically reset first. Control returns to the body before the mind accepts it. Here's the reset. Exhale longer than you inhale. Relax the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Slow your movements. Not dramatically. Not visibly. Subtle. This signals safety to your nervous system. Once the body calms, the mind follows. That's biology, not mindset. The fourth rule: resume normal pace. After a slip, people often change behavior. They talk less than usual. Or they talk more than usual. They become stiff or overly friendly. All of that signals disruption. Instead, return to baseline behavior. Same tone. Same pace. Same presence. This tells others that moment is over. And most people will follow your lead, because they were never tracking it as closely as you were. A crucial insight: expanded. Most people think others are analyzing their mistakes. They're not. They're watching for instability. They want to know: is this person rattled? Will this continue? Can I push further? If you remain steady after a slip, the moment disappears. If you wobble, it becomes a focal point. Stability erases mistakes faster than apologies ever could. That's why calm recovery is more impressive than flawless performance. When a direct repair is necessary, sometimes repair is required. But it must be clean. One sentence. No emotion. No explanation. Example: that was unnecessary. Let's continue. And then you move on. No follow-up. No revisiting. No self-criticism. Repair is a bridge, not a dwelling place. The rule of private processing: never process your reaction in public. Public processing looks like explaining feelings, justifying tone, seeking validation. That weakens authority. Processing happens later. In private. With reflection. Not emotion. Controlled people don't use social spaces as therapy. They use them as arenas of presence. Why fast recovery builds respect: expanded. Here's something counterintuitive. People trust those who recover quickly more than those who never slip. Why? Because recovery shows self-regulation. Perfection looks fragile. Recovery looks strong. It signals: this person can handle pressure and return to center. That's leadership. That's authority. That's composure. The recovery identity. At the highest level, you stop identifying as someone who messes up. You identify as someone who resets fast. That identity removes fear. You no longer dread pressure. Because pressure doesn't define you. You don't fear mistakes. Because mistakes don't trap you. You know, with certainty, that no matter what happens, you will return to control. And that knowledge alone makes you calmer. Calm is confidence. Confidence is authority. Authority is presence. That's mastery. Before you continue, one reminder. Control isn't proven when things go right. It's proven in how fast you recover when they don't. That's why disciplined people train reset systems, not willpower. They don't rely on trying harder after a slip. They rely on structures that bring them back to center automatically. Chapter 8: Command presence without saying anything. There's a moment that reveals everything. A room goes quiet. No one has said anything yet. But something shifts. People straighten slightly. Voices lower. Movements slow. Nothing was announced. No authority was declared. And yet, everyone feels it. Someone has entered the space who doesn't need to speak to be noticed. That isn't confidence. That's presence. And presence is not a personality trait. It's a trained signal. This chapter is about learning how to command attention, respect, and authority before words ever appear. Because the highest level of control doesn't persuade. It pre-frames reality. The truth about presence. Most people believe presence is something you're born with. It's not. Presence is a biological and psychological signal your body sends before you speak. People read it instantly. Through posture. Through movement. Through eye behavior. Through stillness. Long before language. That's why someone can speak well, and still feel weak. And someone else can say almost nothing, and feel dominant. Words don't create presence. Presence gives words weight. Why silence alone isn't enough. Silence without presence feels awkward. Silence with presence feels powerful. The difference is internal order. If your silence is backed by tension, self-monitoring, internal noise, people feel discomfort, not authority. But when silence is backed by calm physiology, grounded attention, emotional independence, people adjust to you. That's the goal. The law of pre-interaction. Here's the law most people miss. Every interaction is decided before the first word. By the time someone speaks, others have already assessed. Are they reactive? Are they grounded? Are they stable? Are they safe to challenge? That assessment happens in seconds. And it's almost entirely nonverbal. Presence is how you win the interaction before it starts. The 4 pillars of silent authority. Commanding presence without speaking comes down to 4 elements. Miss one, and the signal weakens. Master all 4, and people feel you before they hear you. 1. Stillness. Stillness is the strongest signal of confidence the body can send. Why? Because stillness means you don't need to discharge nervous energy. Most people leak tension through fidgeting, shifting weight, touching their face, adjusting posture repeatedly. That leakage communicates. I'm processing something internally. Still, people aren't processing. They're available. Stillness creates contrast. In a room of movement, stillness becomes gravity. 2. Deliberate movement. Presence is not frozen. It's controlled. Every movement should appear intentional, unhurried, economical. Fast movements signal urgency. Excess movement signal anxiety. Controlled movement signals choice. Walk slightly slower. Turn deliberately. Sit fully before speaking. Nothing rushed. Nothing wasted. This tells the room. I'm not chasing the moment. The moment waits for me. 3. Eye discipline. Eyes are the loudest silent signal you have. Most people misuse them. They dart around. Over-maintain eye contact. Look away too quickly. Scan for reactions. All of that communicates seeking. Presence communicates selection. You choose where your attention goes. And when it leaves, hold eye contact slightly longer than feels necessary, then disengage first. That pattern signals control. Not aggression. Not intimidation. Ownership of attention. 4. Breathing as command. Breath dictates state. Shallow breath equals urgency. Fast breath equals anxiety. Chest breath equals readiness to react. Slow nasal breathing into the diaphragm communicates safety and dominance simultaneously. Why? Because predators don't hyperventilate. Slow breath tells everyone there is no threat, because I am the reference point. People entrain to the calmest nervous system in the room. Make sure it's yours. The presence trap, trying to project. Here's the mistake that destroys presence. Trying to look powerful. That creates performance. Performance is fragile. The moment you try to project dominance, your attention turns inward, and presence disappears. True presence is unconcerned with perception. It's grounded in internal stability. You don't act present. You remove what disrupts presence. Noise. Urgency. Approval seeking. What remains is authority. Why quiet people are often misread. Quiet doesn't equal presence. Plenty of quiet people disappear. Presence isn't absence of speech. It's clarity of signal. A present person can speak a lot or a little. What matters is when they speak, how long they wait, what they don't respond to. Presence is selective engagement. The rule of non-reaction. Nothing strengthens presence faster than not reacting to irrelevant stimuli. Interruptions. Side comments. Minor provocations. Background noise. Most people react reflexively. Present people don't. They let the environment exist without responding to it. This trains others to regulate themselves around you. Silence becomes structure. Presence in conflict. In conflict, presence matters more than content. If you stay grounded, voices lower. Aggression loses momentum. Pressure dissolves. Not because you dominated, but because you refuse to escalate. A calm nervous system in conflict feels immovable. People don't fight walls. They stop. The subtle signal that changes everything. Here's a small behavior with massive impact. Pause before responding, even when you know the answer. That pause says, I don't react. I decide. It reframes the interaction. Now you're not responding to them. They're waiting for you. That's authority. What commanding presence feels like. It doesn't feel intense. It feels grounded, neutral, spacious. You're not on. You're not performing. You're simply not pulled. Presence is the absence of internal pull. That's why it's so rare. Training presence daily. Presence is trained in ordinary moments. Stand still while others fidget. Pause before answering simple questions. Breathe slower in conversations. Move deliberately when rushed. Pressure moments are just the exam. Daily life is the training ground. The highest level of presence. At the highest level, people stop trying to read you. They sense boundaries. They sense composure. They sense certainty. You become predictable in the best way. Calm. Stable. Unreactive. And unpredictably powerful. Because you don't leak intent. That's command presence. Final truth of the chapter. You don't need to announce authority. You don't need to display confidence. You don't need to convince anyone of strength. If your body is calm, your attention is disciplined, and your reactions are selective, your presence will speak before you do. And when you finally speak, people will already be listening. Closing transition. In the next chapter, we go one level deeper. Into how to use presence strategically. When to lean in. when to withdraw, and how to influence outcomes without force. Because presence is power. But directed presence is control. What you repeat, you become. Most people stop before this point. You didn't. Chapter 9, use presence to influence without force. Presence is powerful, but unmanaged presence is wasted. High-level operators don't rely on instinct alone. They train when to apply pressure, when to withdraw, and when to let silence do the work. That's why strategic presence training exists, not to manipulate, but to influence outcomes without conflict. If you choose to use these tools, practice them deliberately. Because this chapter isn't about being calm. It's about being effective. Most people try to influence by pushing. They argue. They persuade. They explain. They convince. And the harder they push, the more resistance they create. But there's another way. You felt it before. Someone didn't raise their voice. Didn't make demands. Didn't explain much at all. And yet, you adjusted. Not because you were told to. Because something in the room shifted. This chapter is about that shift. Because the highest level of influence doesn't push behavior. It rearranges the environment so behavior changes on its own. The difference between power and force. Force tries to overcome resistance. Presence removes resistance. That's the difference. When you force, people comply short-term. Resentment builds. Resistance returns. When you use presence, people choose differently. Alignment feels voluntary. Outcomes last. Force creates friction. Presence creates gravity. Why influence fails for most people? Most influence fails because it's reactive. People respond to tone, emotion, urgency, ego. They try to win the moment. But influence isn't about winning moments. It's about shaping conditions. You don't argue the river. You redirect it. The 3 levers of presence-based influence. Influence through presence works through 3 levers. Pace. Attention. Availability. Master these, and you rarely need to say much. 1. Pace. Slow sets the frame. The fastest person in an interaction is usually the least powerful. Why? Because speed signals need. When you slow your pace, others adjust. Urgency drains. Emotional intensity drops. This gives you the frame. You don't rush decisions. You don't match pressure. You don't accelerate to meet demands. Your pace becomes the reference point. And reference points shape behavior. 2. Attention. What you focus on grows. Attention is currency. Most people give it away reactively. They focus on complaints, provocations, emotional displays, and unintentionally reward them. Presence-based influence is selective. You give attention to clarity, solutions, calm behavior, and you withdraw attention from chaos. People adapt quickly to where attention flows. Not because they're told to, but because systems respond to reinforcement. 3. Availability. Scarcity creates value. Over-availability kills influence. If people can always access you, your presence loses weight. Strategic withdrawal increases impact. You don't respond immediately. You don't engage every issue. You don't fill every silence. This isn't avoidance. It's calibration. When access is earned, presence carries authority. The strategic use of silence. Silence is the most misunderstood influence tool. Used incorrectly, it's awkward. Used correctly, it's decisive. Strategic silence. Follows key statements. Appears after questions. Emerges during pressure. It creates space. And in space, people reveal intentions, assumptions, concessions. Silence lets others negotiate with themselves. That's influence without effort. The lean-in/pullback dynamic. High-level presence alternates between engagement and withdrawal. This keeps others oriented. You lean in when clarity is needed. Direction is required. Alignment is forming. You pull back when emotions rise. Pressure increases. Ego enters. This prevents escalation. Influence is rhythm, not dominance. Why explaining reduces influence? Explanations satisfy insecurity. They don't increase authority. The more you explain, the more you invite debate, the more you lower the frame, the more you chase agreement. Presence-based influence relies on assertive simplicity. Short statements. Clear boundaries. Minimal justification. People accept what is stable. They question what wobbles. Influence in disagreement. When disagreement arises, most people try to persuade harder. Presence does the opposite. You acknowledge. You pause. You restate your position once. And you stop. Repetition is pressure. Stillness is certainty. People sense when there's nothing to push against. And pressure collapses without resistance. The non-outcome attachment rule. The moment you need a specific outcome, your presence weakens. Need introduces tension. Presence requires non-attachment. You care, but you're not desperate. You hold position without clinging. This is why confident negotiators feel relaxed. They can walk away. That freedom shapes the entire interaction. What influence feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel manipulative. It feels calm. You're not calculating. You're not strategizing in real time. You're responding from structure. Influence becomes a byproduct of clarity. Daily training for influence. Practice influence in small moments. Pause instead of responding immediately. Let silence follow your statements. Withdraw attention from emotional noise. Maintain pace under urgency. These microbehaviors compound. Over time, people begin adjusting before you act. That's influence. The highest level of influence. At the highest level, you don't try to influence individuals. You influence environments. Your presence sets tone, pace, emotional ceiling. Others operate within it. You don't manage people. You manage the field. Final truth of the chapter. Influence without force isn't passive. It's precise. You're not pushing. You're positioning. You're not persuading. You're shaping. And when presence is stable, outcomes align naturally. That's mastery. Closing transition. In the next chapter, we address the final frontier. How to protect your presence long-term. From burnout, overexposure, and emotional erosion. Because influence is useless if you lose yourself maintaining it. If this chapter helped clarify your thinking, let it settle before moving on. These audiobooks are designed to be listened to more than once. Chapter 10. Protect your presence, long-term. Some strength looks impressive. It moves fast. It speaks often. It never stops. And then it disappears. Not because it was weak, but because it was exposed too long. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It preserves itself. This chapter is about that kind of strength. The kind that lasts. Read this chapter slowly. Pause where needed. Let the space between ideas do some of the work. There's a kind of strength that looks impressive, and then disappears. People who are calm under pressure, until they're not. Composed leaders who suddenly burn out. Grounded individuals who become sharp, distant, reactive. Not because they lacked discipline. Because they didn't protect their presence. This chapter is not about control in moments. It's about control over time. Because real authority isn't built in intensity. It's built in endurance. Why presence fades. Presence doesn't vanish suddenly. It erodes quietly. Through over-engagement, constant availability, emotional labor, carrying pressure that isn't yours. Most people don't lose presence from conflict. They lose it from exposure. Too many conversations. Too many reactions. Too little withdrawal. Calm requires space. Without space, even discipline collapses. The first principle, presence requires withdrawal. You cannot remain present everywhere. And trying to will cost you authority. High-level composure depends on strategic absence. This doesn't mean isolation. It means choosing when not to engage. When to step back. When to go quiet. When to stop responding. Withdrawal isn't weakness. It's maintenance. The rule of emotional ownership. Here's a rule to live by. Not every emotion in the room belongs to you. Most people absorb tension automatically. They mirror stress. They carry urgency. They feel responsible for fixing moods. That drains presence. Presence is protected by emotional boundaries. You can observe without absorbing. You can listen without carrying. You can care without owning. This separation is not cold. It's clean. Why over-responsibility kills authority. People who take on too much responsibility often believe they're being strong. They're not. They're becoming overloaded. Over-responsibility creates mental fatigue, irritability, impatience, reactivity. And reactivity is the first sign presence is leaking. True authority distributes weight. It doesn't hoard it. The second principle, reduce input. A calm mind isn't created by effort. It's created by filtering. What you read. What you listen to. What you react to. What you allow in. Constant input creates constant noise. Silence isn't just external. It's informational. Reduce opinions. Reduce stimulation. Reduce unnecessary exposure. Your nervous system will respond immediately. The power of boredom. Most people fear boredom. They fill every gap with noise. But boredom is where presence regenerates. Stillness with nothing happening. No stimulation. No performance. No reaction. This is where the system resets. High-level calm is built in uneventful moments. The third principle, routine, is protection. You don't protect presence with motivation. You protect it with predictability. Sleep at similar times. Eat consistently. Move your body daily. Create repeatable quiet windows. The nervous system trusts rhythm. When the body feels safe, the mind stays clear. Presence becomes default. Why you must guard mornings and evenings. The beginning and end of the day shape your baseline. Chaotic mornings create reactive days. Overstimulated nights prevent recovery. Guard these times fiercely. No rushing. No emotional input. No unnecessary decisions. Calm is cumulative. The fourth principle, periodic disengagement. Every system needs downtime. You need moments where no one needs you. Nothing is required. No performance exists. This is not indulgence. It's repair. Without disengagement, presence becomes brittle. And brittle things break under pressure. Presence and aging well. People who maintain calm over decades share one trait. They stop proving themselves. They let urgency go. They stop chasing validation. They choose depth over reach. Presence matures when ego quiets. And mature presence is unmistakable. How you know your presence is protected. You'll notice. Less need to explain. Less emotional fatigue. Fewer reactions. More patience. Heavier silence. You won't feel powerful. You'll feel steady. And steadiness outlasts intensity every time. The final integration. Let's close the system. You learn to slow the body. Restrain words. Clear the mind. Maintain control. Recover quickly. Command presence. Influence without force. Protect calm long-term. This isn't a technique. It's a way of being. One that makes pressure smaller. Conversations cleaner. Silence stronger. Final truth. The world is loud. Reactive. Urgent. Demanding. You don't win by matching it. You win by becoming the place where things slow down. Where clarity returns. Where people regulate themselves. Where words carry weight because they're rare. That's presence. And presence, once protected, becomes unshakable. Closing note. You don't need to master this overnight. Just protect your calm today. That's enough. And tomorrow. Do it again. There is a moment most people miss. Not when pressure hits. Not when conflict appears. But weeks later. When they notice they are tired. Without knowing why. Shorter patience. Quicker irritation. Less tolerance for noise. They didn't lose control suddenly. They lost it gradually. Presence wasn't taken from them. It was spent. This chapter is about stopping that loss. Before it's visible. Before it becomes reaction. Before it turns into exhaustion. Why presence must be guarded. Presence fades when it's always available. When every message is answered. Every emotion is engaged. Every moment is filled. That availability feels generous. It isn't. It's leakage. Presence survives on selective absence. Without it, even discipline weakens. The cost of constant readiness. Many people live in a low-level state of readiness. Always alert. Always reachable. Always prepared to respond. This state looks responsible. But it keeps the nervous system activated. And an activated system cannot sustain calm. Presence requires stand-down time. Time where nothing is expected of you. The first principle, strategic withdrawal. You don't need to explain your absence. You don't need to justify your quiet. You step back because it's necessary. Strong presence doesn't announce disengagement. It simply disengages. This teaches others to self-regulate. And it restores your internal order. Emotional separation, expanded. You can feel empathy without merging. You can listen without absorbing. You can care without carrying weight that isn't yours. Most emotional exhaustion comes from confusion about ownership. Ask quietly. Is this mine? If it isn't, let it pass. Presence is protected by this boundary. When calm starts to thin, there are signs. You explain more than usual. You feel impatient with small things. You replay conversations at night. These are not personality flaws. They are maintenance signals. Ignore them, and erosion accelerates. Notice them, and calm can be restored. The second principle, reduce input further. Noise enters quietly. Through opinions. Through news. Through constant updates. Your mind does not need all of it. Filter ruthlessly. Silence isn't deprivation. It's hygiene. The restoration of boredom. Boredom feels uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is withdrawal from stimulation. Stay with it. In boredom, the nervous system resets its baseline. This is where depth returns. This is where presence thickens. The third principle, rhythm over emotion. Motivation fluctuates. Rhythm endures. Consistent sleep. Regular meals. Daily movement. Quiet time that repeats. The body relaxes when it knows what's coming. And relaxed bodies produce clear minds. Protect the edges, deeper. Mornings shape your state. Evenings determine recovery. If these edges are chaotic, calm collapses inside the day. Slow mornings. Dim evenings. Few decisions. These are not luxuries. They are structural supports. The fourth principle, scheduled disengagement. Don't wait until exhaustion forces rest. Plan it. Time with no obligation. No performance. No role. Presence replenishes in these gaps. Without them, calm becomes performative. And performance is draining. Presence over years. People who age with calm don't become louder. They become quieter. They stop chasing relevance. They stop proving competence. Their presence deepens because nothing is leaking. This is the final form of authority. How you know presence is protected, expanded. You recover faster. You react less. You speak only when necessary. Silence feels natural, not tense. You are not detached. You are unpooled. Integration, the long view. This work was never about dominance. It was about longevity. A nervous system that doesn't burn out. A mind that doesn't clutter. A presence that doesn't thin with time. You didn't become quieter. You became clearer. You've reached the end of this training. Not the end of difficulty. Not the end of pressure. But the end of reactive living. From here on, pressure no longer defines you. It becomes information. Something you notice, without obeying. That shift matters more than anything. Because the world rewards speed, noise, and constant response. It pressures people to explain, perform, and react. You've learned a different path. One built on stillness. On restraint. On clarity that doesn't need approval. You now understand something most people never practice. Calm is not the absence of force. It's force under control. When the body is steady, the mind follows. When the mind is clear, words become deliberate. When words are deliberate, silence becomes powerful. From this point forward, you don't need to prove composure. You practice it quietly. In small moments. In pauses before speaking. In the choice not to react. In the decision to step back when others rush forward. These moments won't look impressive. But they will change how people respond to you. They will feel the difference. Not because you said something clever. But because you didn't need to. Over time, this discipline compounds. Pressure shortens. Conflict softens. Your presence deepens. And the calm you carry begins to affect the space around you. That's when control stops being effort. It becomes identity. Remember. You don't need to dominate situations. You don't need to control people. You only need to control yourself. And when you do, everything else adjusts naturally. Carry this with patience. Train it without ego. If this audiobook helped you, we invite you to leave a comment and share what stood out to you. We're genuinely glad you spent this time here. Training focus, discipline, and composure. If you'd like to support this work, please like and subscribe, so you don't miss the next audiobooks coming soon. Thank you for listening. Move quietly. Stay disciplined.